The lumen hum never fades in the induction vaults. It seeps into the bones until even silence vibrates. I remember the taste of metal on my tongue, the way recycled air burned cold in my lungs, and the weight of the data slate pressed into my palm, the decree of my own unmaking. I had dreamed of honor, of the Emperor's light blazing through me like the dawn over Terra's spires. Yet here, beneath the manufactorum's choking vents, honor felt more like imprisonment. They told us we would ascend, but the first thing they took was our names. I still hear the chant of the apothecaries echoing through the vox grills. Flesh is weakness. Faith is form. The words were meant to fortify, but to me they were a blade turned inward, carving away what was left of the boy I once was. Every heartbeat since has sounded like a hammer striking ceramite, steady, merciless, final. Transmit this account across the VoxNet so that the Emperor may judge its truth. Let every echo be a prayer for those who still remember the taste of their own humanity. The lumen hum has no beginning and no end. It's a sound that fills every breath, every thought, until it becomes indistinguishable from one's own heartbeat. When I first awoke beneath that pale glow, my skin slick with chem fluid and my veins burning with the first infusion of hypno-conditioning serum, I believed I had died and been interred in a mechanicus vault. The air reeked of iron and sterilant, a cloying mix that clung to the back of my throat. Around me, the silhouettes of other aspirants lay bound to their slabs, motionless except for the tremors that coursed through their limbs when the pain peaked. I tried to speak, to call out for someone, anyone, but the respirator mask sealed over my mouth hissed back like an animal denying its master. I had been told this was the first step toward glory. The apothecary's words had rung clear before the sedative took hold. To be remade is to be worthy. I remember his eyes behind the lenses, cold, efficient, devoid of cruelty, yet utterly empty of empathy. He might have been a servitor if not for the faint pulse in his throat. They opened me then, and though the anesthetics dulled sensation, I felt each shift of their tools as pressure deep within my chest. The first implant, the secondary heart, thudded to life beside my own, its rhythm alien, too fast, too precise. It was as though I now carried a stranger inside me. Time dissolved into fever dreams. I saw the Emperor's sigil carved into the ceiling above, its wings blackened by age and fumes. In my delirium it seemed to move, its gaze shifting from one aspirant to another, judging. The servitors sang in their monotone chants, machine voices reciting the same binary prayer for each soul on the slab. Some of the boys didn't wake again. I didn't know their names, our identities had been purged from the records the moment we were chosen, but I still remember the way the apothecaries marked their slabs with a drip of sealing wax and the faint scent of burnt incense. They called it purification. I called it an ending. When consciousness finally anchored itself again, I found I could no longer taste the air. The mask had been removed, but my tongue felt foreign. My senses dulled in strange places and heightened in others. I could hear the machinery through the walls, the endless hydraulics, the faint rasp of gears turning behind bulkheads. Each sound carried a different weight now, like my mind had been tuned to their frequency. A tech marine once told us later that the gene seed reconfigures the soul as much as the flesh. I think I understood then what he meant. My thoughts no longer felt entirely my own. They allowed us to stand after the third night. I stumbled, knees trembling, clutching at the cold rail of the chamber wall. Across from me, a boy I vaguely recognized, a miner's son from the hive outskirts, fell to the ground and did not rise. His breathing was shallow, erratic. The apothecary simply noted his vitals, then signaled a servitor to remove the body. There was no ceremony, no words. Only that mechanical hum filling the silence again. I wanted to rage. I wanted to scream that we were human beings, not components. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was a hoarse whisper, a rasp scraped raw by the respirator's passage. He was alive, I croaked. The apothecary didn't look at me. He was weak, he replied. Weakness is failure, and failure is a contagion. Then he pressed a rune on his data slate, and the lumen hum grew louder, drowning even the sound of my own breath. The nights were the worst, though the vault had no true night. The lights dimmed only slightly, cycling through pale tones meant to mimic rest hours. In those hours I dreamt of strange shapes in the dark, serpentine tendrils of light coiling around my limbs, whispering in binary tongue. Sometimes I awoke with blood on my sheets, small streaks from my nose or the corner of my mouth. My body was remapping itself, cell by cell, like an organic machine aligning to some divine blueprint. Pain became routine like hunger used to be. By the 10th day they began to speak to us again, not as men but as projects. The apothecary's assistant read from a litany before each procedure. Let the Emperor's design be pure. Let the clay submit. Let the vessel become strong. We repeated it until the words lost meaning. One aspirant refused once. They dragged him away. We never saw him again, though rumor spread that his remains were offered to the chapter's gene vault as a cautionary display. Whether true or not, it silenced us. Somewhere in those endless cycles I began to forget my own reflection. The mirrors in the hygiene stalls were covered with steel plates. They told us vanity was an impurity. Yet one night I caught sight of myself in a polished medici tray. My eyes glowed faintly in the lumen light, gold where they once had been brown. My skin bore surgical scars that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent serum beneath. I should have felt pride. Instead I felt estrangement. The boy who had entered this place was fading, replaced by something both magnificent and monstrous. There was one thing that anchored me. The sound. That endless droning hum of the lumen. It became a constant, a reminder that I was still inside the forge of rebirth. Every time doubt threatened to consume me, I focused on that vibration in the air. It steadied me, though I could not tell if it was comfort or surrender. It was on the eve of the os modula, graft, the stage that would elongate our bones and reconfigure our skeletons, that I truly understood. The phrase flesh unmade. The medica chamber glowed with sterile light, surgical arms folded like the wings of some mechanical angel. The apothecary's voice over the vox filled the chamber. Endure, aspirant. The Emperor remakes his chosen as he wills. Then came the searing fire through my spine, the feeling of my very frame twisting, bones groaning under unnatural growth. I tried to cry out, but no sound emerged. Only the hum, steady, endless, vibrating through the marrow. When I awoke, I was taller, stronger, and yet somehow smaller inside. The first thing I noticed when I awoke from the os modula procedure was not the pain, though pain was everywhere, nestled deep within every joint, crawling like wire through muscle and bone, but the absence of something I had lived with all my life. Warmth. My blood no longer felt like blood. It moved colder, thicker, as if replaced by liquid metal. My heartbeat had split into two distinct rhythms, one human and one mechanical, fighting for supremacy beneath my ribs. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest and felt both pulses at once. A syncopation that didn't belong in any living creature. The chamber around me was quiet save for the drip of saline from the IV and the faint click of servitor claws cleaning the floor. My cot was soaked through. My body had shed layers of skin during the night, an exuviae of the man I'd been. The scent of it was unbearable, a burnt organic tang that clung to the back of my throat. Across the room, a boy named Loran stirred and coughed, flecks of black fluid spilling from his lips. He didn't make it past the next hour. The apothecary marked the death without emotion, intoning another of his litanies to the machine god as the body was carried away. There were fewer of us now, fewer each day. It didn't matter how strong you were, how devout, how disciplined. The implants chose their vessels the way fire chooses which beams to leave standing. Those who burned too fast became ash. We were permitted to walk after the os modula took root. The corridors were long and narrow, lined with vox grills that whispered prayers of augmentation. The sound followed us everywhere, soft and low. Steel the mind, purge the weak, The lighting was harsh, casting everything in the same sterile blue-white. There was no place here for color, for the tones of life beyond the walls. Just gray steel, white light, and the crimson stains that came when one of us collapsed during march. At intervals we were fed, nutrient paste the texture of wax, dispensed from machines. It had no taste, but it filled the emptiness. Hunger became another measure of time. Between feedings we were injected with more serums. Some induced visions, bright shapes against the darkness, voices that were not ours whispering fragments of scripture. Others caused seizures or a kind of slow, numbing paralysis that the apothecaries called alignment. Alignment of the will to the gene seed's intent, they said. I wondered if the Emperor could feel us crying out inside our skulls, or if his gaze was turned elsewhere, fixed upon more worthy sons. Once during the night cycle I heard someone sobbing quietly in the bunk beside mine. The sound was muffled by the hum of machinery, but it was unmistakable, human, fragile. I didn't look. I didn't speak. To acknowledge it was to share it, and shared weakness was a death sentence. Instead, I listened until the sobs dissolved into a gurgling cough, then silence. The next morning, the bunk was empty. The transformations continued. I could feel the black carapace growing beneath my skin, the lattice of neural ports spreading like roots through my nervous system. When I moved, faint ripples of pain accompanied each flex of muscle, yet I began to notice something else too, a growing sense of detachment. Pain no longer dominated my awareness. It was as if my mind had been dulled against it, or perhaps elevated beyond it. I couldn't tell which. We began the hypno-indoctrinations after the 12th implantation. The process was simple. Lie flat on a slab, eyes fixed on the lumen above, while the chaplain's voice thundered through the vox. The words weren't meant to be understood so much as absorbed, the way stone absorbs heat. He spoke of duty, of the Emperor's vision, of the sacred order of death and obedience. The phrases nested in my thoughts like seeds, sprouting without consent. I began to dream of battlefields I had never seen, of war banners fluttering above worlds whose names I didn't know. Sometimes, between sessions, we caught glimpses of the fully initiated Astartes, the giants we aspired to become. They strode through the upper corridors armored in gleaming ceramite, their every movement deliberate and weighty. Their presence changed the air, bent it around them. We dared not meet their gaze. To do so was to feel like an insect observing a storm. One of them paused once near where we stood. I remember his helm turning toward me, the reflection of the lumen flickering across the golden trim of his pauldron. "Endure," he said simply, his voice like the grinding of tectonic plates. Then he moved on, leaving behind only the echo of that single word. That night, I repeated it to myself as they implanted the secondary lungs. Endure. The pain was blinding, a cold fire spreading through my chest as my body fought the foreign organs. I wanted to resist, but there was no strength left for rebellion. So I endured, and when the pain receded, replaced by a strange new capacity to breathe through poison, I realized something terrible. I was beginning to understand. The process wasn't only to make us stronger, it was to make us obedient. The body obeyed because it was reshaped to. The mind followed because resistance had nowhere left to live. When sleep came, I dreamt again of the hum. Louder now. I could feel it pulsing through the walls, through the marrow of my altered bones. Sometimes it took form, an image of the Emperor's visage, radiant and severe. Other times it became the sound of waves breaking against metal shores. In those dreams I would walk across fields of white ash, the horizon split by a golden light that never drew nearer. I would call out, and the wind would answer in binary, "You are becoming what you must be." I awoke each time drenched in sweat, my heart, both hearts, hammering. And I would wonder, in those few fragile seconds before the Medikey alarm signaled another round of implants, whether the voice was his or the gene seed itself, whispering its own will into mine. The next phase would begin soon. The hemastomen, the Larraman's organ, the catalepsian node.